Detective Lena Torres raced through the smoke-filled streets, knowing every second counted as a ruthless arsonist left a trail of fire and death across the city. This time, the stakes were higher than ever. The city was unusually quiet that night, the kind of silence that presses against the chest and makes ordinary noises, distant car engines dripping water from gutters, seem unnaturally loud. A thin layer of rain slicked the streets, reflecting neon signs and street lamps, giving the urban landscape a distorted, almost dreamlike quality. But the stillness was broken by a rising column of smoke in the distance. Flames licked the edges of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district, black smoke curling into the sky like a dark finger pointing at the heavens. The building had been deserted for years, left to decay and accumulate debris, but now it had become a stage for destruction. Arson investigators arrived quickly, their boots crunching over shattered glass and charred remnants of pallets and machinery. The air was thick with heat and the sharp scent of burning chemicals. Firefighters had already subdued the main blaze, leaving behind a skeleton of smoldering beams and blackened walls. Detective Lena Torres, known for her keen eye in arson cases, stepped carefully through the rubble, scanning for clues. Her flashlight flickered across scorch marks and puddles of water mixed with chemical residue. This was no ordinary fire. The patterns in the burn suggested deliberate placement of accelerants, and the residue indicated an industrial-grade chemical not easily acquired by the general public. Lena crouched near a pile of debris and ran her gloved fingers over a sticky, flammable substance. It was precise, methodical, almost clinical. She noted the arrangement of charred materials. The fire had been designed to spread in a specific pattern, maximizing destruction while leaving key structural elements standing just long enough to complicate firefighting efforts. Over the past 2 months, similar fires had erupted across the city. 3 warehouses, a storage facility, and even a small apartment building had all gone up in flames under suspicious circumstances. In each case, investigators had found traces of the same accelerant, and each scene bore subtle but deliberate signatures. The city had been living under an invisible threat, and the fires were escalating in both frequency and intensity. Lena had studied all previous reports and noticed a chilling pattern. The fires were not random. They were connected by location, timing, and method, suggesting that whoever was behind them was learning, adapting, improving. Someone was experimenting in plain sight, testing the limits of their skill and daring the authorities to catch them. Security footage, witness reports, and chemical analyses all pointed toward the same unsettling conclusion. The arsonist was patient, meticulous, and dangerously intelligent. Lena realized that the fire they were currently examining was more than just destruction. It was a message, a calculated performance meant to instill fear while showcasing the perpetrator's control. As she moved to the next section of the warehouse, Lena felt the gravity of the investigation settle over her. This was no longer a case of property damage. It was a pursuit of a mind that thrived on chaos. A criminal who viewed fire not just as a weapon, but as art. Every step she took through the wreckage brought her closer to understanding the arsonist's method, yet the closer she got, the more she realized how much danger the city was still in. The smoke rising above the ruined warehouse was more than smoke. It was a signal, a silent scream, and a chilling promise that this was only the beginning. Weeks passed, and the city's uneasy calm was shattered by a new fire, this time at a residential complex in the North End. Flames erupted in the dead of night, consuming an entire wing of the building before firefighters could fully respond. Residents awoke to smoke filling the hallways, alarms blaring, and the smell of burning plastic and wood. Panic spread quickly, and those who could escape did so, coughing and disoriented. But not everyone made it out in time. 2 tenants were rescued by brave neighbors and first responders, while another life was lost in the inferno, leaving a haunting void in the building's community. Detective Lena Torres arrived at the scene with her team, her boots crunching against melted asphalt and debris. The fire left a familiar signature, something she had seen in previous cases. A small hand-painted symbol, partially burned but still recognizable, left in a corner near the entrance. It was deliberate, almost taunting, as if the arsonist wanted to be noticed without being caught. Lena recognized it immediately. It was the same marking from fires that had plagued the city over the past 2 months. Her stomach tightened. The pattern was clear now. The arsonist was escalating. Previous fires had mostly targeted abandoned or sparsely populated structures. This one had intentionally endangered lives. She knew that the stakes had risen, that the perpetrator had crossed a dangerous line. Forensic teams carefully collected samples from the burned walls and floor, identifying the accelerant used, a rare industrial chemical consistent with the materials from previous fires. Lena noted the placement of debris and burn patterns, realizing that the arsonist had studied the building's layout, predicting how the fire would move to trap and endanger victims. Each fire was becoming more sophisticated, more calculated, a dangerous progression toward perfection. But the symbol at the scene carried a deeper meaning. Lena recalled an old arson case from 10 years ago, one that had left a man dead along with his dog in a fire ruled accidental. The same symbol had appeared there. It was as if the arsonist had returned to unfinished business, haunting the city's memory with every blaze. Lena's mind raced as she connected dots and patterns. The fires were no longer just about destruction. They were about obsession, about control, about sending a message. Whoever was responsible wasn't acting on impulse. They were deliberate, intelligent, and increasingly bold. The city was their canvas, and fire was their tool. Lena realized that catching this arsonist would require more than routine investigation. They needed to anticipate the next move, to read the mind behind the flames. She pored over maps, timelines, and prior fire reports, looking for patterns that could predict the next strike. The weight of urgency pressed down, knowing that every delay could mean more lives at risk. That night, as she watched smoke curl into the sky from the smoldering complex, Lena understood the terrifying truth. The arsonist wasn't finished. They had escalated from property to life, and the city was now in the grip of someone who saw chaos not as a crime, but as a calculated performance. The investigation intensified in the weeks following the residential fire. Detective Lena Torres and her team worked around the clock, reviewing security footage, analyzing chemical residues, and interviewing anyone who might have seen something unusual. Every lead seemed to loop back to dead ends, each clue fleeting, tantalizing, but incomplete. The arsonist had become careful, meticulous, and deliberate in ways that suggested both intelligence and obsession. Lena studied every small detail, the angles of scorch marks, the timing of fire alarms, even the placement of debris after firefighters had left. Something about the pattern gnawed at her, a subtle logic she had yet to decipher. Then a small breakthrough arrived. One of the chemical suppliers reported a series of odd purchases, small amounts of a rare accelerant bought over several months, all in untraceable quantities. The names on the orders were false, but patterns in the delivery schedules and locations formed a trail. It was barely visible, but it was something tangible. Lena realized the arsonist wasn't just setting fires. They were meticulously planning each one, calculating how the chemical would burn, how it would spread, and how long it would take to be extinguished. Each fire was a lesson, a test, a rehearsal. A retired fire investigator brought another critical insight. The small hand-painted symbol left at each fire was not random. It was part of a set of markings once used in specialized firefighter training decades ago, a system to indicate fire behavior, danger points, and ignition methods. The arsonist had discovered this forgotten knowledge and repurposed it as a signature, a way of marking their crimes as a code. Lena realized that this wasn't just about destruction, this was about mastery. Each fire was a demonstration of skill, an escalation of knowledge, a way to prove control over the city and over fire itself. The team cross-referenced locations, timelines, and patterns from prior fires. They noticed the arsonist favored sites that allowed observation, buildings near roads or overlooking other structures. The fires were carefully staged, designed to maximize impact while minimizing the risk of immediate capture. Lena felt the tension grow. This criminal was learning, evolving, improving with each incident. The escalation wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The arsonist wanted recognition, challenge, and dominance over the people and spaces they targeted. Then came the chilling prediction. Based on patterns in chemical delivery, symbol placement, and previous attack sites, Lena identified the likely next target. A high-rise apartment complex filled with residents. Time was critical. She coordinated with fire departments, emergency responders, and building management, preparing evacuation plans and alert systems. Every second mattered because this arsonist thrived on timing, precision, and fear. As night fell over the city, Lena reviewed maps, surveillance grids, and chemical traces one last time. She knew that they were close enough to anticipate the next strike, but not yet close enough to prevent it entirely. The city was caught in the grip of a mind that used fire not only as a weapon, but as a tool to teach, to threaten, and to mesmerize. Lena understood that this case was unlike any other. The arsonist was intelligent, adaptable, and dangerously meticulous. The next fire would test every skill the team had honed over months of investigation. They were chasing someone who seemed to always be one step ahead, and the stakes had never been higher. The night of the predicted fire arrived with a heavy tension that seemed to hang over the city like a storm cloud. Detective Lena Torres and her team were on high alert, coordinating with firefighters, emergency personnel, and building managers to ensure that every precaution had been taken. Despite the preparation, an unsettling sense of vulnerability lingered. The arsonist had proven time and again that they were clever, patient, and unpredictable. Every detail could matter, and every second could mean life or death. As darkness fell, the high-rise apartment complex was quiet. Families had been evacuated where possible, and neighbors watched anxiously from nearby streets. Lena scanned the surrounding area, her eyes trained for the smallest sign of suspicious movement. The night seemed calm, almost deceptively so. But then smoke appeared, a thin, curling plume rising from the lower floors. It spread quickly, fueled by hidden accelerants and carefully arranged combustible materials. Alarms blared and chaos erupted as residents still inside scrambled to escape. Firefighters fought to contain the blaze. But the fire was more complex than anything they had encountered before. Multiple points of ignition had been set, hidden along stairwells, utility shafts, and behind walls. The arsonist had engineered the fire to maximize both danger and confusion. Lena moved quickly through the chaos, coordinating evacuations and directing teams to areas where people were trapped. Every floor told a story of destruction: charred walls, melted plastic, collapsed ceilings. The smell of burning chemicals was intense, stinging eyes and lungs, yet Lena pressed on, determined to minimize casualties. As she reached the fourth floor, she noticed something strange. One of the ignitions had failed. A wire intended to start a blaze had burned through prematurely, leaving an opening that had saved several lives. Lena's heart pounded with a mixture of relief and urgency. This flaw, though small, was a potential breakthrough. Investigators scoured the scene for additional clues and quickly identified a figure in security footage, a person dressed in dark clothing, moving cautiously along service corridors and exiting just before the fire reached its peak. The arsonist had been close enough to witness the chaos, yet careful enough to avoid capture. Amid the debris, Lena spotted something critical: a boot print in a layer of ash and water, unique in tread and size. It was the kind of detail the arsonist might have overlooked, confident that nothing would connect them to the crime. but it provided a tangible lead, one that could be traced. The discovery energized the team. Cross-referencing sales, local deliveries, and prior patterns of chemical purchases narrowed the suspects significantly. Each piece of evidence built a profile of someone methodical, obsessed, and dangerously intelligent. Lena realized that the arsonist's meticulous planning had a limit. Human error was inevitable. It was this error that would allow them to finally close the net. As the fire subsided and the last residents were accounted for, Lena felt both exhaustion and determination. They had faced the arsonist's deadliest challenge yet, survived, and gathered crucial evidence. The pattern was clear. The suspect was no longer just experimenting. They were escalating, and Lena knew that the final confrontation was near, one that would reveal the mind behind the smoke, fire, and chaos. The city had been tested, and now it was time to finish the pursuit. The final breakthrough came quietly, almost unexpectedly, in the dim light of early morning. Detective Lena Torres and her team had been following every lead, every chemical delivery, every pattern left by the arsonist over months. The boot print from the high-rise fire had been key, narrowing the field to a handful of suspects. Surveillance footage, combined with meticulous record-keeping, had finally revealed the location where the arsonist had been hiding and planning their fires, an abandoned industrial zone on the outskirts of the city. The area was a maze of crumbling warehouses, overgrown lots, and rusted machinery, a perfect place for someone to remain hidden. Lena approached the scene with caution. Her team moved silently, checking corners and scanning for traps. The air was thick with the smell of decay and damp metal, and the city's distant hum felt miles away. Inside the suspected hideout, they found a chilling sight. The walls were covered with maps of the city, symbols drawn with precision, notes detailing every blaze, chemical logs, and meticulously crafted diagrams. Every previous fire was catalogued, each one an experiment in timing, placement, and destruction. The arsonist had transformed the abandoned warehouse into a shrine to their obsession. Among the papers and equipment, Lena spotted remnants of accelerants, matching the rare industrial chemicals used in every fire. Each sample, each note, was a confession in its own way, documenting the planning, the execution, and the twisted satisfaction derived from the chaos left behind. The arsonist's obsession was clear. This was not just crime. It was an art form, a compulsion, and a dangerous game. The evidence was overwhelming, leaving no doubt that this was the person responsible for months of terror, destruction, and death. Then came the moment of capture. The arsonist, a figure who had eluded the city for months, was taken into custody without incident. The person's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the destruction they had caused, a reminder that obsession often hides behind ordinary appearances. All traces of the chemical, the notes, and symbolic markings were documented as evidence, a detailed record of crimes that had left the city scarred. Lena reflected on the careful, deliberate nature of the arsonist, someone who had studied fire not merely as destruction, but as a tool to dominate and mesmerize. In the aftermath, the city slowly began to recover. Buildings were rebuilt, scars on streets and neighborhoods were repaired, and residents tried to move past the fear that had gripped them. Yet the psychological impact remained. The fires had tested not just structures, but people's resilience. Lena often thought about the strange allure of fire, the way it captivated attention, commanded fear, and drew both victims and perpetrators into its hypnotic glow. Smoke had been the arsonist's signature, a medium through which they exerted power and control. Though the case was officially closed, Lena knew that obsession could never truly be contained. The city was safer, but the memory of the fires lingered, a reminder of what meticulous planning and obsession could unleash. The arsonist had been caught, but the lesson remained clear. Chaos could rise anywhere, and vigilance was the only shield against minds that saw the world in flames. Lena's reflection was sober yet resolute. They had faced the fire and survived, but the embers of human obsession were never fully extinguished, waiting always for the next spark.